This is an original work of fiction. Any similarities to persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. It is the story of Pudgy's first adventure to the center of the earth. While there are no naughty words, some parts of this story may be too difficult for little ones. Pudgy suggests parents listen to story first and make decision accordingly whether they can watch this video. After supper, an explanation of events occurred, as well as an apology by the dragoness for what had happened. Cobalt was satisfied with the outcome of events. Due to the magic crystal's charge status, Xylenia and Pudgy were unable to return to the cavern far below, so they would have to remain on the surface for about a week or so. Cobalt and Pudgy soon came to find out that as long as their new dragon friend remained happy, she was able to control her size. The dragoness had shrunk down to about 4 feet in length, so she was more easily able to navigate the humans' home. This turned out to be perfect timing, as the human holiday of Halloween was tomorrow. The little hedgehog started to tell Xylenia all sorts of wonderful stories. Human children dressed up in costumes, coming to visit, and candy passed out. The best part was they got candy to eat too. The night progressed with much merriment, though eventually Cobalt excused himself and took Pudgy with him. This left the dragon all alone, with a strange rectangle box and the people inside talking about things that she did not understand. She wondered just how exactly did the people get into the box, and if there was a way for them to exit the box as well. Pudgy's backpack was sitting on the dining room table, along with a white bucket that was painted strangely. There was a brightly colored, sweet-smelling object that held even more objects inside the container as well. The place she was located was warm and dry and bright. These tall stands covered with beige circles were emitting light from an unknown source. It was not long until Cobalt returned with Pudgy, who was wrapped up in a little dark blue blanket. He set his hedgehog friend down on the couch, and the critter wiggled his nose happily. The man disappeared again to head into a room nearby. The dragon could hear water running, and it wasn't long until the human approached her with a wet cloth. She reared back at first, until Cobalt held out the strange item for her to sniff it. It was just a cloth with some warm water. Xylenia froze in place with unblinking eyes, while the human gently washed her body as she sat on the carpet. It was indeed warm and had a pleasant smell. It took a couple of trips, but eventually, too, she was clean. The dragoness giggled when the human disappeared and then reappeared with a large fluffy blanket that had a picture of some sort of a feline creature on it. She too was tucked in, and the television set was turned off. Lights were turned off one by one, except for a small one in the corner so the room wouldn't be totally dark. The dragoness smiled as she sighed, listening to the footsteps of Cobalt as he went upstairs to retire for the evening. The call to sleep was heeded, and the world drifted away. Xylenia rose from her slumber, all wrapped up under the warm, soft blanket. She looked around and the room was starting to brighten from an increasing of daylight due to the morning. Cobalt was sitting quietly in an overstuffed brown chair nearby, sipping from what appeared to be a beverage of some sort that was inside of a steaming cup. The man was looking at a tiny rectangle that was glowing on one side. The human smiled at her when he saw her glancing in his direction, and then looked back to see Pudgy already bouncing on the couch. Today was the day of Halloween, which meant fun, and costumes, and candy. The hedgehog was so excited, and this year he could share his merriment with his new friend as well. The dragoness watched as a human man brought up decorations from the floor below this one. It was going outside and inside through the front door. All sorts of strange objects were placed outside, while Pudgy ran around on the floor with a tiny orange foam road cone that said party animal on his head that he had found from one of the boxes. It wasn't long until the human brought in a huge bag of brightly wrapped objects and started to sort them into buckets. Then he wandered off, making sure to leave one bucket on the floor for Hedgehog and Dragon access. Pudgy scampered quickly up and waved at his new dragon friend and said, "Hey, Xylenia! You want some candy?" The hedgehog asked as he wiggled his nose. Dragon walked over slowly on all fours and then sniffed at the bucket on the floor. She reached out with her black claws to take an object with a white stick. The little critter showed her how to unwrap the paper from the exterior, and soon there was a ball of red at the end of the stick. Pudgy did the same, and he had a green ball. He started nibbling on the candy, which prompted Xylenia to do the same. The refined sugars hit both of them immediately and resulted in much bouncing. Pudgy began to narrate what his human friend was doing and why he was decorating. The human man had a reputation in the neighborhood for being the scary house as he went all out for Halloween. Of course, later in the day, when Cobalt came downstairs dressed in a black cloak and a hideous skull mask, that prompted a hiss from the dragon and a hasty explanation by the hedgehog. As the hours passed, the two critters ate candy and peeked at the human man from the kitchen window. Cobalt had gone outside during the trick-or-treating hours. Unfortunately, this year a wickedly heavy rain with a frigid wind blew outside. This meant that few little kids showed up, and the external festivities ended shortly thereafter. Soaking wet decorations were brought back inside and placed downstairs in the mechanical room to dry. The man's wet costume was hung up to dry as well, and Cobalt changed into dry clothing. The human went over to the television set and put a silver disc into a black box underneath it. Soon, the annual showing of a Halloween favorite movie was on the screen. It was set in the northeastern United States, featured singing and a guy walking around in pantyhose for some reason. It was a silly movie. It played in the background while candy was eaten. Xylenia soon learned that chocolate-covered wafers were her favorite, while the human favored peanut butter covered in chocolate. Cobalt didn't remember how it happened, but somehow he woke up on the couch in his living room. He was covered under a blanket, with Pudgy curled up on his chest. Xylenia was curled up on the floor in front of him, but she had her head resting on his top of his legs. Candy wrappers were strewn all around the couch on the floor. As the man wiggled, he was able to relocate a sleeping hedgehog and dragoness enough so he could quietly remove himself from the couch. However, as he tiptoed away and had just shut the powder room door to use the facilities, he could soon hear animals bouncing around in the living room. After he completed his business, the man made the decision to stay inside today, since the outside temperatures had only continued to plummet from the night before. It rained off and on, and Xylenia watched out the window as the leaves started to lose their orange colored canopy in earnest. The day proceeded without incident, and in the days that followed, the human would disappear for long stretches of time. This meant that the dragoness and the hedgehog were alone. The two new friends went to visit Pudgy's cabin in the woods. They also explored the general forest area before returning home for supper, as well as fun with Cobalt in the evening. They were having so much fun that they forgot about the week delay, so on one much warmer autumn day, Pudgy was jumping in and out of the leaf piles around his cabin. His dragon friend had amassed them by flicking her tail quickly. The critter could hear the big crystal inside of his home start to vibrate. The Duke's voice called out, catching Xylenia's attention as well, and resulted in both animals walking over to the cabin.
Pudgy Hedgehog, I think you forgot something.
Hi, Duke! What did Pudgy forget?
Oh, no one in particular. Just the one who gave you a magical crystal to come visit.
Oh, dude, it's my fault. I've been keeping Pudgy occupied, plus it's so much fun on the surface. Cobalt puts us there and we watch silly things on something called a television. It's nice and warm and safe.
Oh, I see, Xylenia Dragon. Pudgy, I guess you don't need me anymore. I'll just stay in my cavernous kingdom, alone, forever, sad.
The little hedgehog started to feel incredibly guilty and started to whimper. Pudgy, sorry! Pudgy didn't forget about the Duke. Pudgy, leave right now! There was a small audible shriek that could just barely be heard, as the Duke realized he had perhaps acted a bit too much.
Pudgy? But wait, Pudgy Hedgehog, do not cry. That was my poor attempt at humor. I really must work on my social skills. I'm so out of practice. Oh, I have some good news actually. With the overuse of the magical energies, I was able to ascertain the location from whence you departed with your dragon friend. That is the Great Passage. It's a huge system of caverns that stretch a considerable distance. They, in fact, lead to my kingdom, and if your dragon friend is agreeable, she could perhaps fly you the distance necessary to reach my cavernous home.
Hmm. I would be agreeable to such a request. I, too, would like to meet you, dude. Pudgy has told me stories, and I would like to see your kingdom as well.
A most fortuitous course of events has laid before us, dear friends. I shall look forward to your eventual arrival. When you see the glow of the cavern and the natural light, you will be within my kingdom. Look for a central structure, and you shall know that you hath arrived. Now return to your friend Cobalt and let him know of your departure.
And if the Duke is evil, Pudgy, I could eat him.
Hey, I heard that.
Just kidding, Duke. Uh,
There was some audible grumbling from the Duke before the crystal went dark and silent. Pudgy was allowed to climb up onto the dragon's back, and soon Xylenia was walking quickly through the forest. Her claws dug into the dirt as her paws crunched in the orange and golden colored autumn leaves. Across the forest, over the creek, up the hill, past the thorn bush, to the crazy road with the delivery trucks the two friends headed. As the green dragoness watched the human vehicle approach, the brown delivery truck nearly ran off the road when the wide-eyed driver saw a dragon standing there. Once the truck had passed and recovered from nearly tipping over, the dragoness quickly ran across the street. Up the small hill, make a right, and across the backyards they went to return to Cobalt's house. The glass doors on the deck had been left unlocked, so with a flap of her wings, the dragon was easily able to fly up to the back black-stained wooden deck. It wasn't too difficult for her to slide open the door and then enter the warm home. The human man was sitting in his overstuffed brown chair and was talking to someone on his smartphone. The two animals stayed as quiet as best as they could, though with the dragon turning around in a small circle, she did slide the door shut. Unfortunately, it made an unavoidable clang sound, but at that point the man had finished his call.
Pudgy, Xylenia, did you two have fun in the forest today?
Yes, we did, Cobalt. Xylenia made leaf piles and Pudgy got to jump in them. Yay! Also, the dude contacted us. He's upset we forgot about him. We need to leave soon to go visit him. He said that the big cavern where Pudgy found Xylenia, it stretches the whole way to the cavernous kingdom. The dragoness nodded, in agreement with her hedgehog friend, and started to speak.
Cobalt, I've never flown that far deep into the caverns before. I've never really had a reason to, so I'm not sure if this Duke is telling the truth or not. However, I will be accompanying Pudgy on this adventure, so you have my word I'll keep him safe.
You better, Xylenia, or I'll be very mad at you. No dessert. Ever again.
Both the little hedgehog and the green dragoness looked really sad and started to pout. Ed laughed and raised his hands while laughing even louder to signify he didn't mean it. Once the two critters had calmed, the man got out of his seat and headed into the kitchen. Prior to his phone call, he had made a huge pot of cream of potato soup, which was still simmering away on the stove. The human started to make grilled cheese sandwiches in a frying pan next to the large pot. Pudgy looked at his dragoness friend and smiled when he heard his human friend speak again.
I was just kidding about the dessert thing, you two. And Xylenia, thank you for taking Pudgy to see the Duke.
Cobalt arrived with the food shortly after he spoke, which drew a smile from both of the animals. Pudgy's portion was small, but it was a hedgehog, and was served on a small dessert plate with a tiny cup of soup. The little critter started to happily munch away. Xylenia was soon brought the pot, wrapped in a large blue kitchen towel. 4 sandwiches were placed on a plate and sat on the floor nearby to Xylenia. The human left and then returned with his meal, sitting down in the overstuffed chair once more. He turned on the news, and all the friends ate happily while watching the weather guy talk endlessly, on and on and on, about an approaching cold front. In western Pennsylvania, the mere hint of snow resulted in mass hysteria as people rushed to get milk and bread. As soon as it was time for a commercial, boom! A bread commercial played on the television set. After the commercials played, the weatherman came back on to go over the same information. Again. But this time, he was in front of a grocery store, standing in the dairy aisle. Dinner was quickly eaten, and soon thereafter Cobalt retrieved the various serving vessels to be washed in his kitchen sink. While the human man did so, the hedgehog scampered around his dragon friend as she sat on the area rug and watched television. The dragon looked contemplative, and then soon lowered her head and face towards the little bouncing hedgehog.
Pudgy. I've been a while for so long. After we beat the dude, I want to come back and stay here with you and Cobalt. I don't want to be alone again.
Sounds fine by me, Xylenia. The forest where Pudgy has his cabin, it has all sorts of places for you to live in. Well, provided you stay your current size. I'm not sure we could hide a full-size upset dragon in this. Well, maybe some cargo netting and bungee cords. Anyhow, winter's coming, so I'm gonna have to figure out a way to keep the two of you warm over there. If it gets too bad, you can always come over here and stay with me.
Oh, Pudgy would love for you to stay in Pudgy's forest, Xylenia. Pudgy met all sorts of nice animals over there. Pudgy's sure they would love to meet you too. The dishes were done, and Cobalt walked past the 2 critters with a smile on his lips, gently patting Xylenia on her head as he passed by and stepped over the hedgehog. The man walked to the top of the basement steps, turned on the lights, and headed downstairs. It wasn't long until he came back up carrying a black toolbox and a white laundry basket full of various scraps. Setting down the items nearby to where the chair was, the human turned and walked over to the dragoness. He took out a piece of cloth with markings on it and then started to measure the dragon. She froze in place, silver eyes wide, as his cold hand slid across her scales. Once satisfied, the man returned to his chair and got out a notepad and took some notes.
What was there for, Cobalt?
Well, I needed some measurements. I need to make some sort of a riding harness for Pudgy. Otherwise, you're gonna have to carry him in your paw while you fly. And I expect it's kind of hard to land on 3 paws.
The dragoness looked thoughtful before nodding and watching the human as he worked. In the laundry basket was pieces of leather, rope, canvas, and cloth, and other related sundry items. They had been torn off or cut from items that had grown past their useful life. The human he continued a trend from his relatives, uh, For reasons unclear, they were amassing items in case of future need. Although, where his family members had houses full of stuff and never used, the man tried it as best he could to use what he collected. He wasn't blameless, however, and he was soon having a house filled with things eventually. Unfortunately, Cobalt couldn't sew, so the man used a leather tool to attach snap rivets. The hedgehog scampered in and out of the basket, as well as around on the floor to play with Xylenia as well. It took about an hour of crafting, but soon there was a rudimentary harness made. It was fitted to the dragoness and required a few adjustments. After the corrections were made to the satisfaction of both Xylenia for comfort and Cobalt for the safety of his hedgehog friend, the harness was ready to go. The harness was not stylish at all, but would serve its purpose. There were loops on the harness in various places, which the little hedgehog immediately discovered. Pudgy was able to climb up onto his dragon friend's back with little bit of effort. Soon, the critter was able to reach the center of her back and was able to secure himself with loops of canvas fabric. The straps were positioned in such a way that they went around the areas of her wings when they connected into her body.
I know. It doesn't look good, but it'll work, I think. Maybe if I had some more time, I could make a proper leather one, but it would be neat to be able to use saddlebags, like with a horse. That way you could bring more supplies, but that's talk for another day. Okay, time for sleep, you two. We have an early morning tomorrow.
The human man washed his two animal friends with warm, damp rags and dried them off with a fluffy white towel soon thereafter. Once again, tucked in on the couch and on the floor with nice warm blankets, the two critters fell promptly asleep. Cobalt went downstairs to work on a few things on his computer, though after a few hours retired to the upstairs bedroom as well. The night passed quickly by with the human arising first. After readying himself for the day, he went downstairs and started to pack the little hedgehog's backpack with food and water. Coffee was brewing, and he felt a tug on his jeans pant leg up around his ankle. The little hedgehog was wiggling his nose and bouncing happily. Pudgy was too excited to eat and wanted to go right now. Once the dragoness had a chance to wake up and ready herself for the trip, she giggled as the hedgehog in his backpack and mining helmet was getting a hug from Cobalt as he walked into the living room. The man sat the hedgehog down between Xylenia's folded wings and helped him strap himself in for safety. Xylenia wasn't expecting it, but giggled when she got a hug from the human as well.
Please, you two, be careful. If this dude really is bad news, get out of there quick. Understood?
The little hedgehog waved while the dragoness grinned as suddenly both disappeared in a flash of green light. Once again, the two friends were in a near pitch-black cavern. There was no sound whatsoever, not even drops of water like before. The little hedgehog rubbed his eyes and spoke out loud. "It's so dark in here. Hey, Xylenia, do you need Pudgy's headlamp to see?" Dragoness laughed and started to walk slowly forward.
I can see the dark Pudgy. Though I do need some time to reacclimate it. It's hard to go from oh, a bright room to a dark cave.
It wasn't long until Xylenia was able to see properly once again. Dragoness started to flap her wings, and Pudgy felt the large animal take flight. The hedgehog could only see what his headlamp illuminated. The dragon's muscles made her back ripple and flex with each wing movement. The green scales glistened from the light. The hedgehog decided to turn off his headlamp, as the battery power was limited. If only the hedgehog had been able to bring better light sources. The cavern was filled with wonders that only his dragon friend could see. Giant stalagmites and stalactites of various colors filled the cavern. It was a vast network of caves that all connected along a central path that only led further and further down into the earth. The air was thinning and growing very stale. This made Pudgy sleepy, and it wasn't long until he did just that. When the critter had grown quiet for a far too long period of time, Xylenia realized that the air situation was causing an issue. This led her to wonder just exactly how the dude was able to live so far below the earth. Was this person a human, like Cobalt, or was he something else? For that matter, was it even male, or was it something disguising its voice? The vast chasm started to narrow, and the expanse of the underneath drew uncomfortably close to the edges of her wings as she flew. There was a downdraft, as something was pulling the air into places unforeseen. Following the currents, the dragoness adjusted her wings and was able to effortlessly glide on the hot winds. Temperature was rising as they continued to progress further and further down. The walls were full of minerals, of colors and patterns that no one had ever seen before. Xylenia could see in grayscale, meaning no colors, but even gray held marvels to gaze upon in all directions. As an unknown amount of time had passed, she could see the faintest of blue light coming from somewhere.
Pudgy, Pudgy, wake up.
The sharpness of the dragoness's tone caught the critter's attention, and he woke up. Pudgy, so sleepy. Xylenia's eyes filled with concern while she nodded her head. The air was so thin that even she was starting to have trouble keeping her eyes open. She would take in deep breaths and try to control her breathing as best as she could to preserve oxygen. Through the narrow passway, she continued to fly, starting to see a faint light now. And it only continued to increase the further she flew. The wild nature of the natural stone started to smooth out as well, almost as if someone had shaped it by hand long ago. The passageway weaved to and fro, like the stream that flowed through Pudgy's forest. Although always continuing to follow the path downwards, deeper and deeper, further and further, until finally Xylenia passed through a curved opening. Inexplicably, the air quality was starting to stabilize and it was becoming easier to breathe. This made no sense given the depth she was flying through. If anything, There should be no breathable air at all. This made her question just exactly what was going on. The passageway opened into a wider cavern, which allowed her to extend her wings to glide once more. Adjusting her wings, the dragoness banked slightly to the left and marveled with silver eyes and archways on either side of her, cut from the ancient stone of the cavern. Ornate columns covered in symbols that had none seen in 1,000 years. Pools of deep water filled the central area, almost forming a canal of sorts. Stairways of stone approached the water and went far beneath its surface. The water was bubbling, and from the action, oxygen was being produced at a consistent rate. The increase in air quality resulted in the dragoness feeling much better, as well as Pudgy being able to wake up. The little hedgehog looked in wide-eyed wonder at the beauty of the natural earth. Stone was pure white, with flecks of silver running through its veins. The huge stone archways towered, flanking them on both sides, seemingly supporting the massive ceiling of the cavern. There was a blue light being emitted directly from the rock itself, and bathed everything in a cool glow. The little critter spoke up. "Where are we, Xylenia?"
I don't know, Pudgy. This place is ancient. What?
Xylenia continued to follow the path of the water while occasionally flapping her wings to maintain altitude. There was a huge waterfall in front of them, cascading down a cliff face of jagged granite boulders. She flapped her wings harder, and she was able to ascend to clear the dangers, fly over the edge of the waterfall. As the dragoness leveled off, she could see a vast lake of water that spread out in all directions. Surrounding the lake was a forest, far denser than any forest that the hedgehog had ever seen before. The oak trees towered and had trunks far thicker than any on the surface. The canopy of leaves was a full sea of orange and red leaves. Trees? This far underground? How's this possible? The little hedgehog asked, curiously while wiggling his nose. Wasn't long until Xylenia spotted, at the far distance of the lake, a structure.
Pudgy? I think we're here. Look at the size of that thing.
The little hedgehog watched as his dragon friend flew closer and closer to what appeared to be a giant castle. It was a sprawling building with multiple towering spires. Lead tiles formed shingles for the multiple roofs that covered the building. Hundreds of windows could be seen, all glowing with a warm golden light. Brown brick formed the walls of the castle, though not any shade the hedgehog had ever seen before. It must have been rock quarried from within the cavern, which is perhaps why it didn't look like normal brick from the surface. Xylenia adjusted her wings and eased down to land on a path of light brown bricks that led up to the front of the castle. As she folded back her wings, the dragoness spotted a wrought iron fence. on either side of the path. There were no gates blocking the path, though towering lanterns flickered with tall flames within their globes. The hedgehog looked up and watched as clouds started to float by above their heads. In many ways, if Pudgy were to wake up in this place, he would have thought he was on the surface. The temperature was stable, being warm but not oppressive. There was humidity present, similar to that of his home. The critter's head was whipping left and right so fast his neck was starting to hurt. There were so many wonderful things to look at. Fine statues of porcelain were standing proudly at various points around the home. They seemed to mark the location of paths that went deep into the forest that surrounded the castle proper. The dragoness, too, was looking with eyes filled with curiosity as she continued to walk forward at a quick pace. It wasn't long until she reached the base of a small set of curved steps that ascended to the massive front door that led inside of the structure. The stairs were curved around a fountain, which water bubbled out from somewhere beneath their paws. The jet of water was not strong. It came out perhaps a foot or so from within the pool. Still, it was a sight to see, and both looked down into the pool to see what resembled silver minnows swimming around in the fountain. They appeared to be fish, but nothing that a hedgehog had ever seen before. As Xylenia ascended the steps, Pudgy watched as a huge lantern dangled from a thick chain above their heads. It, too, was flickering with a flame within, and it cast a soft golden light in all directions. Pudgy wiggled his nose as they approached the massive set of dark oak wooden doors and heavy black iron hinges.
Oh, Pudgy. This must be the Duke's structure, as he called it.
This is the largest castle Pudgy's ever seen. Mr. Duke, we're here! Can you open the door to let us in? The little hedgehog said clearly while he reached around with the back of his paw to touch the tiny crystal within his backpack. The crystal vibrated, and soon both animals watched as the doors started to swing open inwards in unison. They watched as the room within was revealed. It was a grand reception hall with floors of black obsidian running throughout. White stone walls towered on either side of the grandest of halls. Xylenia swallowed hard and then started to walk forward. Her talons were clicking the stone as she walked. As her tail cleared the threshold, the heavy wooden doors started to close slowly behind them. Pudgy turned around to watch and noticed there weren't any people moving those doors. For that matter, he didn't hear anything in the room. There was no sounds of heating or cooling systems like at Cobalt's house, nor were there any sounds of people. Or animals, for that matter. The hall stretched a fair distance within the structure and reached an even grander ballroom. White polished marble floors ran throughout. Archways of alabaster stone formed the supports to a massive painted ceiling that towered overhead. The murals appeared to have been hand-painted, with scenes of historical battles, as well as natural scenes like farming and daily life. Pudgy recognized the flag of Great Britain, which was proof of his assumption that they were indeed within the Duke's home. More statues were flanking the room, though this time Pudgy could see them in greater detail. There were men and women dressed in stately attire. As Xylenia passed one statue, Pudgy could just barely read Queen Victoria on a placard of gold.
Welcome, welcome, Pudgy Hedgehog and Xylenia Dragon to my home.
The two animals watched as a fair-skinned, tall man, perhaps 6 foot, walked confidently towards them at a slow pace. He was wearing a British military outfit which consisted of black boots, white pants, and an ornate red coat. Adornments of gold emblazoned his coat with a wide black waistband and cuffs, which formed the rest of the coat. He was wearing a black hat with a white feather plume on his head. Clipped to his belt was a sword within a black scabbard. He had a black cane tipped with a silver topper that resembled a dragon. Pudgy waved excitedly from the back of the dragoness, which made the human man smile. Xylenia smiled as she examined the dude with her silver eyes. The man looked to be in good health, though he did appear to be aged considerably. There were clear signs of gray hair that could just barely be seen poking out from beneath the hat. He was also sporting a salt and pepper beard, though it appeared to be of a neat appearance. Dark brown eyes stared back at the dragon, and then at the hedgehog, while his lips curved into a warm smile. "Hi, Mr. Dude! Thank you for inviting Pudgy and Xylenia to your wonderful home!" The little hedgehog exclaimed excitedly, while bouncing within the harness on the back of his dragon friend. Xylenia giggled.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, dude. Your home is indeed amazing, and the surrounding lands are truly wondrous.
Their host motioned for the dragoness to follow him, and the man turned around with a flourish. He walked at a slow, measured pace, with the black cane providing support while he walked. Though his general appearance did not reveal it, he was far older than either animal could tell. Xylenia walked beside the dude while Pudgy bounced happily on her back and looked up at the human while he spoke.
Your words fill my heart with gladness that you approve of my home. Long ago, I arrived here desperate and wanting. I had no meaning to my life save for the desire of currency to satisfy my debts. However, over the years, I've come to appreciate the finer aspects of the wealth of life and the riches of the non monetary variety.
The tap of the cane provided a rhythm, almost like a metronome. The dude continued to speak in a flowing manner, using many words that the hedgehog didn't understand. He listened intently as the dude spoke of his journey from his home in Great Britain, and the arduous journey it indeed to reach this cavern. As far as the human had been able to determine, his new home was located somewhere underneath the Atlantic Ocean. The bioluminescence that created the light above was from a plant that was native to the ocean floor. Once, a long time ago, when he could move better, he was able to reach the ceiling and confirm that it was covered indeed with plants. He chose not to disturb them for fear of contamination. He didn't want to risk the source of the light within the cavern by touching them. There had been no human within this cave for a time much longer than his lifespan as far as the host could tell. When he arrived, there was indeed a central structure It stood at the end of a large lake of deep, clear water. It was within that structure he found a treasure too precious for it to fall into the wrong hands. For that reason, he chose to remain within this cavern, safeguarded until the eventual arrival of King George. However, that day seemingly was never going to arrive. So during his many days within this place, he chose to adapt it to proper British standards. Treasure allowed him the ability to reshape the structure into the exquisite castle that surrounded them. The ornate adornments, the grounds, as well as the dense forest of trees. The trees, however, were in a perpetual autumn state and never turned green. The dude theorized it was due to the light that was being emitted from the plants above, although it could also be that the soils of the cavern floor were high in iron concentration. So that meant the soil had a deep red tinge to its makeup. Xylenia stayed quiet, only listening and watching as the ornate hallways turned at a sharp right, left, and right. She was trying to remember their path, but it was becoming difficult to remember. Pudgy was first to notice that the rooms seemed to be the same. He didn't catch it at first, but after the third left turn, he noticed the doorways that led into the rooms all appeared the same. The little hedgehog didn't want to interrupt the dude, but this was starting to bug him. There was something off, though he couldn't quite place his paw on it. Mr. Dude, can Pudgy ask a question?
Certainly, my fine hedgehog friend. Ask away.
Your home is wonderful, and Pudgy loves your story. Can Pudgy ask why every room looks the same, though? The dude's warm expression became strained for a moment, which caught the attention of Xylenia. Dragoness stopped walking beside the dude and let him get ahead of her. The human stopped and turned slowly while tapping the cane for effect.
You noticed. I was wondering when you would. Truth be told, while I have made wondrous changes to this cavern, I'm alone here. I've lived far longer than even I ever expected. I've utilized the treasure and reshaped this place in my best interpretation of the heights of British society. What good is it when there's no one to share it with? I fear I've lost the imagination of a young man.
I understand how you feel, dude. I've been alone all my life until one day a little hedgehog appeared in my cavern. I don't want to be alone ever again.
The dragoness felt Pudgy sliding off her back, and then watched as he scampered past her and up to the black boot-covered foot of the dude. The little critter bounced on his left boot and hugged his ankle. The human started to smile once again, and carefully bent down to gently scoop up the hedgehog with his left hand. As the dude stood back up, he watched as the little hedgehog started to hug him as he brought him closer to his chest. Wiggling his nose, Pudgy spoke as he looked up at the man. You can come live with Pudgy if you want. Pudgy made sure Kobold would be okay with it, and Xylenia is coming too. Xylenia giggled and nodded, which made the Duke laugh boisterously from deep within his chest. Soon the hallways faded away, and a bright light filled the area.
That sounds like a fine idea. Although, I must remain here to protect and study the treasure. Now, my friends, please look, but don't touch.
It was the grandest library that the hedgehog had ever seen. Thousands of books, manuscripts, scrolls, tomes, stone tablets, magical artifacts filled the shelves and adorned the walls. The ceiling looked like tree branches that were interweaved with a star-filled night sky flickering above the canopy of branches. The floors were mirrored glass of a material that neither animal had seen before in their lives.
I have found scrolls and tomes from the Library of Alexandria, from the time of Alexander the Great. Hand-painted papyrus scrolls from the ancient Egyptians are held within stone sarcophagi. I found Roman scrolls, most likely from the Library of Celsus, original texts of the Greek scholars who formed the basis of the Christian Bible, as well as notes from the time during the actual days of Christ's life on this world. What's more, there are places here with knowledge from times far before the time of man. It's for that reason I must never leave this place. While I am not vested in all the ways of this place, I have learned enough to be able to manipulate the cavern to protect it accordingly.
Pudgy could understand why the Duke didn't want to leave. If the surface world were ever to find out that this place existed, they would spare nothing to destroy it. The vast knowledge within would be hidden away or hoarded by powerful persons, or destroyed to ensure it did not clash with the current way of things. Little Hedgehog nodded as he spoke while looking up at the Duke. But you're not alone now, Mr. Duke. Pudgy and Xylenia are your friends, and Cobalt too. Cobalt has to go to work, but so he can't come on a Duke adventure. But we can come, and we have your crystal. It'll take a week to recharge, but we can come back often and bring you goodies from the surface world. The elderly man smiled warmly and nodded while he spoke.
I would like that. Your presence here already has filled my heart with gladness. I would like to find out more what has happened since my departure from the surface world. Now, enough talk of that. Let us retire to the dining room. I find myself peckish and could use a spot of tea.
The Duke led them through the library and through a tall oak doorway. They were soon located in a large room with a huge trestle table of wood, almost as dark as obsidian. There was a fine white tablecloth on it with silvered candelabras. With a flick of his wrist, the candles were lit, and plates of food appeared at one end of the table. The Duke sat at the head of the table with Xylenia to his left and Pudgy to the right of him. The hedgehog was set down beside his plate, while the dragoness walked up to her place as the Duke motioned with his hand. A fine assortment of a variety of cheeses, along with crackers and little salty green spheres appeared on the plate. The human sat down in a heavy, ornate chair and smiled at his two guests. Picking up a crystal goblet filled with red wine, the Duke spoke.
A toast to our new friendship and many years of good health to all.
In the days that passed, the critters explored the library, only looking and not touching as they had been advised. In the evenings, they had their own room with a squishy bed large enough for the dragons to stretch out and lie down on. Of course, they did have to test the bed's bounciness factor, though. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The Duke was a wonderful host. The food was exquisite. Cakes and pies and breads and little buns that went poof with steam and creamy butter. Xylenia thoroughly enjoyed the various roasted meats that were served. Their human host told fascinating tales of Great Britain during the 1800s, as well as his journey to reach the cavern. There was much laughter in the air. Pudgy, in turn, told his grand tale of how his grandparents escaped to America and of his journey to meet the Duke. The hedgehog's stories filled the human man's mind with curiosity, as well as a sense of worry as to the status of his home. Yes, he had been gone for a considerable amount of time, but he was still a loyal English subject. His national pride ran deep within his veins. After a week passed, it was time to go home once again. The human received many hugs from both the hedgehog and the dragon. The magic crystal that Pudgy carried was attuned with the library, so it would be quick to travel between Pudgy's forest and the Duke's home. The human also had coordinates for the forest should, in the future, he decide to come to the surface for a visit. The process of saying goodbye took a long time, as there were many hugs to be given and received. The departure was only for now, as both the hedgehog and dragon promised to return often. The hedgehog was given an assignment, and would have to talk to Cobalt about getting the history of the Duke's home since the time of his departure. Once more, Pudgy was strapped to the back of Xylenia's via the harness. Both animals waved and smiled, and a green flash filled the library. The little hedgehog rubbed his eyes with his paws as the light was blinding. In time, though, as Pudgy's eyes adjusted, he could see the familiar sight of his forest home. The dragoness giggled as she realized that she had been teleported back to Pudgy's cabin and not the kobold's house. The hedgehog bounced happily and spoke excitedly to his dragon friend. "Welcome home, Xylenia!" This is the end of part 4. Pudgy hope you liked the story. If you liked the story, can you please like this video? You don't have to, but Pudgy would appreciate it. Pudgy is working on the next story series now. The next story series is going to be Pudgy Saves Christmas. Pudgy gets to visit Santa Claus. Yay! Please subscribe to Pudgy so you don't miss out when Pudgy uploads the next story. Thank you!